Welcome back. I'm here again with Stephen Lopez. You might recall we spoke last week. Stephen has a wealth of knowledge, and I hope by now you have followed him on LinkedIn and you've read some of his pieces that he's posted. Daily contributor to LinkedIn with all kinds of knowledge. Stephen said something when we talked last week that piqued my curiosity, and I was hoping that he could enlighten us. For those who are interested in the real estate world and or investing. Stephen mentioned that he does some real estate investing. So, Stephen, I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about that and kind of how you got started, where you're at now, and what do you think the future looks like?
Sure, John. Yeah, and it's really good to be back. Yeah, so back in 2018, when I was traveling full time for pickup, I was literally on the road nonstop in 2018 and 2019, and I had my house in Fort Worth, Texas, that it was just vacant, and so I decided that I would list it on a short term rental platform, which is Airbnb. And so if you kind of go back, to 2018, Airbnb was not necessarily what it is today. 5 years ago, it was still, it wasn't necessarily as structured as it is today. You didn't necessarily see the players that you see today in the industry. And is what I mean by that is that you now have, now portfolio owners that have short-term rentals as a different type of real estate investment. And so for me, back in 2018 and 2019, it was a great experience. So I had the house. It was furnished, and it was also well decorated as well. My mindset was more, I was wanting to cater to someone like myself that was traveling full time and that was going to be living somewhere, temporarily, as I did, for anywhere from 30 to 60 days. And so I knew the things, that me as a full-time traveler, that I wanted to have. And I knew the things, that were important. And so that's what we did. I hired someone to also help me to really be the hands-on manager. And since I was not able to be there, he himself, he's a very large short-term rental property manager. And at the time, back in 2018, he was still very small. Today, he manages more than 300 listings on Airbnb across the entire Dallas-Fort Worth area. So he's done very well in his business.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, tremendous, growth. And so for me, it was a great experience. You hear like all these negative things around, Airbnb and the press. A lot of that is, yes, can be because of, maybe guests, that are staying at the property that are just not, properly vetted. It also has to do also with the host as well. And the host needs to also be, experienced of knowing how to list their ad, knowing how to properly vet guests as well, knowing how to also properly price your listing as well. You obviously want to attract those individuals that are not going to cause any issues, for the neighbors and things like that. We were very fortunate, and I say we because myself and also the property manager, we were very fortunate in that uh, most of our guests who were staying at my property there were generally there for no less than a week. I believe the longest reservation that we had was, I believe, 6 weeks. And it was mostly individuals that were in town because of work. And so it was exactly, who we wanted to really target. I'll say we didn't necessarily do anything special in terms of advertising. It was more the setup The location was not even in an area that is very close to a lot of the major attractions. It's probably 15-20 minutes away. And but we were able to still do, very well. That's what really, started my path in terms of having, that type of interest in the short term space. So 2018, 2019, and then I was off the road, and so I briefly moved back into that property in 2020, and so I converted that property though from a short term rental to a long term rental property now, and have been very fortunate in that I've had the same tenant there for over 3 years now. Fast forward today though, in the short term rental industry, is in 2020 during the pandemic, there was a lot of people that were traveling once we kind of knew, what was happening. So from about, June forward, there was this boom that was just a tremendous travel boom. And so there was a lot of attraction towards renting a short term rental. The short term rental space, though, converted more into what's called medium term rentals. And that's mostly because if we kind of go back, then to 2020, there were so many individuals that were now working now remotely. They were able to work, from anywhere. And so this really allowed them to be able to uproot and to be able to move their families to wherever they wanted to for 1, 2, 3 months at a time. And so it really created a gold rush in 2020 for Airbnbs. And there was a tremendous increase in the number of hosts, and really just the number of individuals that were interested in wanting to have their space listed. It really gave me an opportunity to use the experience that I had learned in 2018 and 2019 to really start to also help also other individuals and to consult, with them. There's a lot of things, behind the scenes, with Airbnbs that you really have to really think of, like all the way down to the last detail, like a wine bottle opener, like just all the details and all the furnishings and all the amenities that you have to have, for you to create, just a great experience, for the guest. And so it's really what started I guess you could call it almost a side hustle of me helping other hosts to really become, very effective in the space. And so everything, from not only helping them, with the furnishings and things like that, but also helping them also with the softwares. There's various softwares out there that merge all the calendars from various platforms. There's also softwares that'll help you with the pricing as well. So there's a lot of things, behind the scenes. And then also too, Airbnb is also, constantly doing updates, to their platform. They're constantly doing updates, to their features. They're constantly doing updates to the search algorithms and how your listing is also presented on the platform. Obviously, you want to always be, number one, and you want to be at the very top. And so there's ways to be able to make your listing, really stand out, from others. And we're very visual people now, right? When you see a property that really stands out because of the really nice photos, or because maybe something in the photos, catches your attention, it's also the listing, the way that it's worded as well, too, the way that it's written. There's a lot of detail work that goes into that. And so that's also something is that I mean that I also advise on too as well, and that I also help um, with. And so it's interesting though what's happening though today. 2020, 2021, even most of 2022, it was a very strong, solid market for short-term rentals and also medium-term rentals. Today, there's a lot of things that are now going on now, okay, within the space, and it's interesting to see what's happening because there's a lot of movement. So one, um, uh, there's a lot of people that no longer are able to work from anywhere. Okay. So now you have a large segment of your guests, that you had at that time that now have to live locally to their work because maybe they have like the weekly hybrid schedule where they have to be in the office. The next area that was really, really big during the pandemic is the travel nurse community was gigantic. Like there
Yeah.
was a tremendous amount of medical professionals, specifically nurses, that were traveling. That has declined quite a bit. And so the need for that has also changed as well, too. In general, just people that were also taking advantage of the ability to be able to work from anywhere, um, you know, that has also changed as well too. But the most interesting thing that has changed now is that for so long, Airbnb and short-term rentals have really operated in what I call the wild, wild west, meaning most cities had no regulations around short-term rentals. You could set up anywhere you wanted to. There was no regulations. You didn't have to register. You could do it anywhere you wanted to. Residential zones didn't matter. Today, that's changing. It's changing very, very fast. And there's a lot of places now that you could do short-term rentals in the past. And I'll give a couple of examples. The state of Colorado last week, they just passed a complete ban across the entire state. Now, that is very aggressive. Very surprised, that they did that. But there's a lot of cities that have taken that step. I'll say locally here in Dallas, Fort Worth. So the city of Fort Worth, all short-term rentals are banned in residential areas, and so that just came out a couple months ago. And it's interesting because the city of Fort Worth has not actually come out to say how is it that they're going to enforce this, because there's still listings and there's a lot of listings there. The city of Dallas is going through a very, very contentious time now. They have been considering what to do with short-term rentals now for 3 years, and the city council is going to vote in just a matter of weeks. And it is a very, very divisive issue. Like both sides are fiercely fighting each other for, yes, we want to have short-term rentals, and the other side is no, we don't want them here in the city of Dallas. So it will be interesting to see what happens if they do a complete ban. The city of Dallas is going to have work to do. Currently, there's about 6,000 short-term rental listings in the city of Dallas. So it's interesting to see what's happening right now. And so my advice, because I do get people to reach out to me and they're asking me what I set up right now within the city of Dallas, and my answer is, what's your risk level? What's your risk tolerance? What is your plan B? Like, for me, my answer is probably going to be different than somebody else. As long as you have a plan B, then you're okay there. We're also fortunate in that, we're also surrounded also by other cities where it is still legal. You may just have to register, but we have the opportunity to also do that. So what I find the most fascinating though by all of this is that, Airbnb, okay, themselves, the platform, they've been very quiet on this issue. So for them, to have major city like Dallas, to be speaking about it looks like we're going to ban you. There has been no representation, and there has been seemingly no support from Airbnb themselves of actually defending their model. So I don't know what's going to actually come out of it, but it's just an interesting time in the space because there is a tremendous amount of fallout. The other thing that's happening too as well is that you had investors that they purchased properties with the sole intent of using them for short-term rentals, and they purchased them over the past couple of years. And these properties were purchased really at higher prices than what we're seeing today. Well, with the higher pricing and the less bookings, mainly because of less travel by certain segments and the saturation of the market of other listings, is now really causing a lot of pain. And so we're starting to see a lot of fallout there too. So currently today, I'm more in a role of actually advising those that are in the business, and my plans, or actually my work and what I'm doing in their real estate has actually changed, and so I'm actually focused on really other things. I still have a very high interest in short-term rentals, but I'm going to wait and I'm going to see how the dust settles. But meanwhile, that's what I'm doing, though, still for those, that are still actively in the space.
So what is the controversy? I know nothing about this industry. I'm a Hilton guy. I think I've stayed in an Airbnb one time, and it was because a family rented it in Colorado, actually. I'm baffled. Is it just because of regulation and taxes, or is there an actual threat to this that this industry presents?
So there, and I'll just come out and I'll just say it, there are a lot of very poorly managed listings on Airbnb. Okay.
Okay.
They're poorly listed by individuals that do not understand that the short-term rental space is not real estate investment. You are now in the hospitality business. That means you're running a mini hotel. And that
Got it.
means that everything that happens at that property, including late night parties, all types of things, is your responsibility to keep under control. Unfortunately, there has been a lot of bad press, and I could also see that a lot of this bad press is also being highlighted by the hotel industry. Obviously, Airbnb's short-term rentals have also taken a cut out of their business. I will say though, John, there is a need for short-term rentals. When you think about you want to go somewhere, and let's just say there's 4 or 5 people going somewhere, you cannot go to a hotel and rent out a hotel room with 3 bedrooms and 2 baths and nice big patio. I suppose you could, but it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. You can rent a
Mhm.
very nice home on Airbnb for anywhere from 250 to $300 a night, and it'll just have all the space that you need. Um, uh, One of the complaints around the platform and the pricing structure is also the additional fees, like the cleaning fees and things like that, which I do agree. When you stay at a hotel, on your invoice, it does not reflect there's a cleaning fee. Uh, I I do agree though that for Airbnb, it is something that overall with the pricing structure, it needs to change to really blend those costs into the actual rate, as opposed to having that like a whole separate line item. Um, and because I mean, there's a wide range of just cleaning fees that are out there as well. So it's definitely not a perfect system, um, and I would say most of the cities do have a need to have some type of regulation, around the industry. Like they should know where are these short-term properties operating at. There should be some type of a registration system. I also believe there should be some limit as well too. There's a lot of talk around it. It's only causing the housing um, shortage to be more because there's a lot of short-term rentals that are listed on the platforms. And I can see that, yeah, that may be, some possibility. But I think it really comes down to it is time, for the industry, to mature, and it's time to no longer be operating in the wild, wild west.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So to just devil's advocate, it seems like a more mature approach to this might be instead of an all-out ban, some type of regulation and reporting and auditing. It's interesting. You talked about there's bad players, because I'll be honest, that's the first thing that popped into my head when you started talking about how you did this was like, how do you, and because I know nothing about the system, some people may be watching this saying, what a dumbass, there's a rating system or something. But so as a provider of a place to sleep, how do you go about marketing it from a safe perspective? Because obviously we've heard stories about people putting hidden cameras in hotel rooms. So I'm not saying hotels are better by any means, but there's that concern that you're in somebody's home. It's a lot easier to hide surveillance equipment, listening devices, whatever. And we know that there are some bad players out there. We know that there are bad humans that will absolutely capitalize on situations like that. So is there a system built in where there's some type of protections for the consumer, or is that kind of what you're talking about when you say there's bad players?
Yeah, there's there is definitely some protection in the terms and conditions, for the host. It's very explicit around if certain things are found to have been used, such as cameras where they are not allowed. Airbnb is very specific that you can have cameras, but it's very specific as to where you can have cameras, and it is not inside the home. Now, has that happened before? Absolutely. There have been some reports of that. There's so really the terms and conditions really come down to being very explicit. But this is how I like to really put it is just like most business today, Airbnb is no different in that it lives and dies off of reviews. And the reviews work both ways. Like me as a host, I can review you as a guest. Me as a guest, I can review you as a host. My recommendation has always been is you have the opportunity to share, private feedback, with one another. And that's great because, that's where you can really get, very detailed. But I think is what sometimes people don't necessarily do, or they take it to the extreme, is one, they may not want to leave a negative review to someone because that's not in their nature. Or then you have those that they take it to the next level and they leave something really harsh and really unprofessional. I'll say I went down to Houston here recently, and I stayed at an Airbnb, and it was a three-story townhome that I stayed in, and I didn't realize that it was connected with uh, two other units. And so I drive a big pickup truck because I live in Texas, and the driveway was actually such that it was very awkward to get inside the two-car garage. Now, their listing said that there was off street parking, which is why I went there, because they had on premise parking. I was going to be able to park in the garage. Most garages here in Texas are pickup trucks, fit inside there. And because of how this thing was laid out, there was no way my truck did not fit even at an angle. Okay. So then I asked the host, I said, can I park outside, or on the street? And they said, yeah, and there were some other cars out there. On the second night that I was going to leave, my left side mirror was crushed, and it was like, someone came and intentionally, just crushed it. It's exactly why I did not want to park on the street. Like, it's exactly why I chose to stay there at that Airbnb. My private feedback to them was, look, I'm in the business. You really have to get super detailed about your parking. You need to advise that a large vehicle will not fit inside this garage. Why? Because it's important to me as a guest to know that I can park on the property. And then in my public review, I did make a mention, and I said, just be advised that if you drive anything, that's larger than a mid-size SUV, you're not going to be able to park. I parked out in the street. My experience is my mirror was vandalized. Okay. Doing that because that's how it should be. Like, I want to alert the next guest who may have a large vehicle that says, man, I would really like to stay there. This guy has a big pickup truck. He wasn't able to. Now I got to weigh the risk. Is that what I want to do? That's what Airbnb should be about. It should be about, being transparent. And if there's a way to be able to improve your listing, I mean, that's what you want to do. Ultimately, the short-term rental space is about the experience. And if you fail on that experience, it's just like the delivery business, John. If you fail on that experience, then you only get one shot. And so you have the one shot to be able to create the right experience, but it's about knowing how to list your property. It's about knowing how to call these things out because it's important to someone.
It's funny you mentioned the rating system, and I'm glad that exists. I refer to it as kind of like the Uber rating system, because that was the first time I was exposed to a rating system where both parties could rate each other. Um, and I think that rating system, of course, being in the delivery business, we're used to surveys, we're used to getting nitpicked. I think that we need a human rating service where we could rate each other. So I assume the owner of that B&B probably wasn't happy with your feedback, although I mean it was honest. And I can see, like, I was reflecting as you were talking, thinking, how would I feel if I was that homeowner and got that feedback? And I was like, you've made my property unsafe because people are going to think it's unsafe, but it's a real review. And that really happened, and that could really happen in the future. And I think what you really did is you probably saved them some type of awkward encounter in the future, because the next Steven did read that and say, hey, yeah, this is Texas. I drive a big truck. I'm going to have the same experience. I will tell you, Steven, I think it's universal though, because when I bought my house in Michigan, that's the first question I asked the realtor. Was he was driving um, a Ford, a four-door Ford pickup truck. At the time, I was driving a four-door Ram pickup truck, and I said, "Hey, would you mind putting your truck in there? I want to see if it fits." And he's like, "Oh, it'll fit. It'll fit. They're big enough." It did not fit. I did not get to put my Ram inside that garage. So,
Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, it's really those details that need to be called out. And I guess, I just advise, hosts to really put themselves in the shoes of the guest. Like, think of all the scenarios that could come up.
mm,
Um, I've never had to stay at a hotel where I've had to say, I wonder if there's space for my truck. same thing with Airbnb hosts. I say, these things are important to us. You may not actually think about it, but these things are important to us. So I'm currently working on a new property with one of my friends that I'm helping to set up. There will always be a need for short-term rentals. The business is not going away by any means. Even in places where it is currently banned, there are still hundreds of listings. So I'll say, like the city of Fort Worth, there's still hundreds of listings. You can go on Airbnb. You can go into Miami where they have a pretty heavy ban in a lot of areas. There's hundreds of listings there as well too. So it's not necessarily going anywhere. There is more work that has to be done to really to be able to regulate this, and for cities um, to really figure out like how is it that we work with the short-term rental industry.
Yeah, well, on a different subject, a different interview, a different day, we can talk about how bans don't generally work. So I think bans just drive attention to the matter and make more people want to do it. So,
That's it.
Stephen, I'm grateful for you sharing your knowledge with me today on this. It's an area I have absolutely no knowledge on, so thank you. And quite frankly, I love the way you tell a story because you make it easy for me as a storyteller. You pretty much answered all of my questions in the first answer, which I love because I just get to sit here and absorb the knowledge. So thank you very much.
You're welcome, and I really appreciate your time too, as well, and also being on here with you. And it's always great to connect.
Thank you. And for those of you who have not yet, please subscribe to the channel. If you hit the bell, you'll get a notification when I upload a video. If you don't want to subscribe, you don't want to hit the bell, at least like and share this with someone who you think might benefit from this knowledge. And I'm grateful for your time and for the attention to this video.